Even though her name is not as well known as the infamous Ilse Koch or Irma Grise, Aloise Orlowski was no less notorious among the concentration camp inmates than her comrades in arms. Orlowski's main distinction was that her career advancement was accompanied by frequent transfers from place to place, which helped, in fact, to conceal later the worst excesses of the warden. This is X-War History, and we will begin. It's all about money. Orlowski's full name was Alice Minna Elizabeth Ealing. The woman was born in 1903. According to some reports, she was kicked out of her family for her commitment to Nazi ideas, and then Orlowski even married an immigrant jeweler man. Admittedly, no documentary evidence of the marriage has survived. It is also not known for certain what kind of education Orlowski received. According to some reports, she could not finish regular school either. Whether she was expelled or whether she stopped her education herself also remains unknown. She was 36 years old when World War II began, so she came to work in the concentration camp system absolutely consciously, and it is impossible to write off her decision on some kind of romanticism and so on. The reason for Orlowski's recruitment as an intern was absolutely trivial: money. She was lured by the high salary and the possibility of a fairly rapid career growth. All the more so since no information about Orlowski's previous jobs has been preserved either. More likely, having no education, the woman was making her living by some casual earnings, or generally dragging out a rather harsh existence with a low-paying job and no family. The fate of her husband, as well as the fate of her family in general, if there was any, remained a mystery behind 7 seals. The beginning of the horrific path. Despite the fact that Orlowski was not formally part of the SS, very soon she received the title of Model SS Officer. That was her nickname given to her by the prisoners themselves. Orlowski began her career in the extermination of prisoners at Ravensbrück concentration camp. After initial training under Maria Monday, Orlowski was transferred to the Majdanek concentration camp in 1942. There, her teacher was one of the most terrible executioners, the Stomping Mare, or Kamina Braunsteiner. Orlowski quickly enough adopted the experience of the female executioner, adding her own trademark style. She loved to throw children over the heads of the condemned unfortunates when she drove the prisoners into the gas chamber. Pairing up with Braunsteiner, Orlowski became one of the camp's most terrifying warders. It was she and her friend who took the victims to the gas chambers and closed the doors, leaving the prisoners to face imminent death. The hard-working employee was noticed quickly enough, entrusting Orlowski to supervise the women prisoners, who were sorting out the seized valuables and money, in pair with an executioner. Of course, Orlowski herself did not forget about herself, leaving some little things for her own enrichment. Orlowski was soon promoted to the Plageau concentration camp, where she earned her title of Model Employee. The fact is that Orlowski quickly became a close confidant of the camp commandant, so much so that the commandant, SS Untersturmführer Amon Goeth, the butcher of Plageau, entrusted her with the storage of documents relating to the mass execution of prisoners. Goeth liked to simply shoot the prisoners with a sniper rifle and then destroy the relatives of the dead, claiming that he did not need the disgruntled in the camp. All these facts were recorded very meticulously, and who knows what testimonies would have been voiced if the documents were not kept by Orlowski. By the way, Orlowski's orders were strictly obeyed. The files were kept in her possession until the last moment, until Germany had fallen. Only after that, an exemplary employee decided to destroy all documents. According to some reports, Orlowski became the right hand of the butcher, not solely because of her pedantry. However, there is no documentary evidence of a connection between the commandant and Orlowski except for some suspicions among the surviving prisoners, of whom, unfortunately, only a few remained in Plageau. According to some estimates, about 150,000 people were exterminated during the existence of the camp. The mocking of prisoners. But apart from paperwork, Orlowski did not forget her main passion: bullying prisoners. In Plageau, she invented another entertainment. She used a whip to beat out the prisoners' eyes, which was automatically considered a death sentence. Blind prisoners could not work, so they were sent to the gas chamber. Then she refined her hobby a small improvement. When a new batch of prisoners arrived, Orlowski herself would choose the unfortunates who were destined to become blind on their first day in the camp and, on that same first day, go to the gas chamber. Orlowski's further relocation was quite logical, to the Auschwitz concentration camp, where she took an active part in the infamous death marches, when prisoners were transferred to other concentration camps to avoid being liberated by Red Army and Allied units. Thus, Orlowski accompanied prisoners to Władysław Śleski. Incidentally, from that moment on, she changed her behavior dramatically. Prisoners later recalled that she comforted the tormented, sometimes even helped and, quite unbelievably, even slept with the prisoners. Most likely the warder was simply afraid of reprisals for her deeds, so she decided in advance to at least somewhat redeem herself in the face of future trials. In essence, to some extent, Orlowski succeeded. Retribution and death. After the liberation of Ravensbrück, Orlowski was arrested by Red Army units and sent to Poland. During the Krakow trial, November 24th, December 22nd, 1947, she was tried as a defendant in the death marches. Perhaps that is why, taking into account the surviving prisoners, the punishment of the former warder was quite mild, 15 years in prison, of which Orlowski served only 10, after which she was released for good behavior. The fact that Orlowski's activities as a warderess were not considered during the trial also played a role here, especially since almost no one survived in Polish Plaszow, so there was no one to tell about the eye-beating. And Ravensbrück belonged to Germany, so the superposition of these factors, coupled with the testimony of survivors in the death marches about the good warden, led to this outcome. Later, however, the famous Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal turned his attention to Orlowski as well, presenting indisputable evidence that the former warden was not only a kind and empathetic person for the death march prisoners, but also a brutal executioner at the Majdanek concentration camp. It was in a new case, the so-called Third Majdanek trial, that Orlowski was detained again in the year 1975. A new trial was held in Düsseldorf, Germany, but Orlowski did not live to see the verdict. She died in 1976, having lived to a rather respectable age, 73 years old. That is how the fate of the exemplary SS officer ended. An unknown story. It is quite interesting that historiographers write nothing about her post-war life and do not even quote from her court appearances, although it is possible that the grey, unremarkable Orlowski deliberately chose this tactic to simply disappear so that no one would pay attention to her in any way. And it needs to be said that she almost succeeded. In any case, in spite of the atrocities committed, Orlowski is hardly known to anyone, unlike the other female wardens, whose names are indeed much more famous. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to X War History and leave a like.